What is 5G? How much better is it than 4G? Do we really care? Is it coming soon? What is it exactly? So 5G just simply means fifth generation. It's the next generation of mobile telecommunication technology, cell phone technology. Right now, most of us are using 4G. In the early 2000s, we were all very excited about 3G. And now we've got 5G. Each generation of cell phone technology is defined by the technical capabilities of the towers that are transmitting signals to our cell phones. Now, those towers are actually called base stations, and this is important to know for 5G specifically because not all base stations are cell phone towers for 5G. I'm going to get into that later. So the capability of the base stations, the cell phone towers, the base stations is what defines the technology, defines the generation. 4G, what we have right now, the requirement is a bandwidth of 100 megabits per second and latency of no higher than 100 milliseconds. Now with 5G, the requirement is a bandwidth of 20 gigabits per second and latency no higher than 4 milliseconds. This is a very, very big deal. On the latency, right off the bat, we're going from 100 milliseconds to 4 milliseconds. And latency is, if you don't know, the time it takes for data to get from point A to point B. So for that signal to get from our cell phone to the base station, in 4G, it can be no slower than 100 milliseconds to get there. With 5G, it can be no slower than 4 milliseconds. That's a huge jump. In the bandwidth, we're going from 100 megabits per second to 20 gigabits per second. This is the amount of data that we can send at a time. The 20 gigabits is 20,000 megabits. So we're going from 100 to 20,000. It's a huge deal. Now, to pump the brakes on that a little bit, we need to explain that these technical specifications are applying to the base station and not to our cell phone. So when we talk about 20 gigabits per second, that's not the amount of bandwidth that your cell phone receives. That's the amount of bandwidth that the base station is transmitting. And if there are other cell phones connected to a base station, which there most certainly are, you're going to be sharing that. But that being said, these specifications are minimums. So in order for a base station to qualify as 5G, it needs to deliver a minimum of 20 gigabits per second, no slower than 4 milliseconds. But as 5G infrastructure is developed and expanded, it's going to shoot way past that. Now, how does 5G actually work? And why is it that 5G is so much better than 4G? The main reason for this, it's worth noting that there are a ton of technologies that are a part of this fifth generation that make it a lot better than 4G. And I don't have the time to get into most of it. But the really meaty one is that 5G is using a whole new spectrum of radio waves to transmit its signal. So if you don't know, the way cell phones work is that we are using radio waves to send data between a cell phone and a cell tower, okay? And normally we are using radio waves in a spectrum known as sub-6 because these are all frequencies that are below 6 gigahertz. 5G also uses sub-6, but it is introducing a whole new spectrum that we call millimeter wave. And this is between 24.5 gigahertz and 52.5 gigahertz. So we've got these really high frequency waves that 5G is able to use. And one of the main things that is special about that makes it so much better is that we can create much larger radio channels for cell phones to send their signal on. With 4G, The biggest channel that we can create between a cell phone and a tower is 120 megahertz in range. With 5G, the largest channel we can create is 800 megahertz, significantly bigger, and that's in large part because of this higher frequency range. There is a caveat to using higher frequency radio waves, and that is they are much more delicate than these sub 6 gigahertz waves. Higher frequency radio waves can be distorted by rain, by foliage, certainly by walls. It doesn't take much. So, in order to make 5G work, we can't rely on cell phone towers to deliver the signal. We have to install hundreds of thousands of small base stations, transmitters, um, all around so that our cell phones can be much closer to the base stations, so that the signal will not be disrupted. And this is why it is such an undertaking to install 5G, since we can't rely on cell phone towers. These 5G base stations, they will be in cell phone towers, and they will be in what are called micro cells, which are basically smaller cell phone towers. But then we have other 5G base stations that are like big boxes that will be on telephone poles, they'll be on rooftops, they'll be on the street, on the sides of buildings, you name it. And then we have even smaller 5G base stations that are going to be inside of buildings. And they're actually very similar in size and in function to like a home Wi-Fi router. And that's why creating a 5G network is a very long and ongoing process. Now, 5G service actually exists in about 35 American cities, but this is not the fully realized 5G that we're all looking forward to. What is being offered is basically a 5G service that's cross-compatible with 4G. So they're using 4G cell towers to deliver a 5G service. Service providers don't yet have that full grid of small base stations that will deliver the high speeds that we're looking forward to. That's not coming for another 3 to 5 years. So it's important for you to understand that even if you have a 5G service on your phone, it's not going to be the incredible experience that it will be a little bit further down the road. But once 5G is fully realized, it is going to change the world.